Welcome to Water Sessions, a Water Council podcast. Mention any risk anywhere in the world, and you'll find a connection to water. We explore water challenges and the future of water innovation with experts in the water community, sharing stories and perspectives that you won't hear anywhere else. A special thanks to our series sponsor, Rexnord, a global leader of advanced water management solutions and smart technologies. Rexnord solves smarter for its customers to deliver hygienic, safe, and efficient products that protect human health and the environment. Additional support is provided by the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. And now, the host of today's water session, Charles Fishman.
Today, we've got Dragan Savic on the podcast with us, the CEO of the KWR Water Research Institute in the Netherlands, a distinguished water research center that traces its heritage back almost 70 years. Dragan has 30 years in the world of water, stretching from Canada back through the UK and to the Netherlands. And Dragan, you're an expert on artificial intelligence and machine learning and how to use those techniques and technologies in the world of water. These are data processing, computer science, computer programming tools and techniques that, frankly, the world of water has really resisted, even though they could solve a lot of problems for us and give us tremendous insight into how we handle all kinds of water-related issues. Tell us the story that I heard about one of your early uses of artificial intelligence at a water utility in Canada, just to give people a little sense of what AI can do for you and how it works, and also how long it's been around.
Thank you, Charles. Just to make sure that your audience understand, I'm a water engineer first. And then by understanding AI and machine learning, I'm applying these technologies in the water sector. And that's how the project that you're referring to started. I was working with a UK consultancy, and we were offering these optimization services to different utilities. And we got this contract in Canada in the region of York, which is just north of Toronto. And they were looking 30 years ahead in designing their strategic water supply system because they were going to double in population over those 30 years. And they had 10-year chunks to plan for the development of the water system. And during the process, we actually came up with a solution that satisfied all their technical criteria and was $50 million cheaper than the solution that they planned to spend for that first 10-year chunk of planning. The problem was how to design a system for, say, 10 years ahead of that current situation. And by the way, it was 30 years ago. They knew where the streets are going to be. They knew where the pipe have to go, but they didn't know what pipe diameter sizing of the network was very important. They projected what the demand was going to be. So the AI was borrowing from the nature, using the same principles and analyzing hundreds of thousands of solutions, which individual engineers or even a group of engineers would take years to analyze. So we've done that all within a single computer run.
But what the computer was doing was growing the pipe network the way the water utility would have wanted to. And growing, that is to say, we're going to have to dig trenches and put pipes. And the key cost question is, what size pipe in each place, because that determines the cost of the pipe, but also the cost of the installation and what's going to be available. And the point you're making is that if you're going to double the size of a community in 30 years, there's lots of ways you can lay your water pipes. And even if you've got money and time for 10 engineers, they could lay out one good system every 2 weeks that you then have to take the time to analyze. You actually said to the computer program, here are the things the water system has to do. Here's the geography, here's the pacing. And anybody who's involved in AI knows this. The I stands for intelligence, but in fact, the system isn't that intelligent. It's just fast. And what you're saying is That computer program, even back 30 years ago, might have designed 100,000 versions of how you could lay the pipes out for these subdivisions and shopping centers that didn't exist yet. And of the 100,000, it's quite possible that literally 99,500 of them were, you just would have glanced at them and thrown it away. Totally unacceptable. But the remaining 500 is still 10 times what any ordinary human being would have been able to do. And then you take those 500 and you can sort them when you get the computer to do the work of 10 engineers for 5 years nonstop. You get something out of that. You sometimes get a surprise.
Yes, quite often we get solutions that we couldn't have imagined or couldn't have attempted to solve beforehand. Some of those combinations, as you said, will be totally out of question. But by chance, and that's what happens in nature, mutations allow that chance to happen, you get something that looks a little bit better. And those are the good solutions. And then those good solutions you allow to reproduce next time. You copy them, you change them a little bit, combine them in another solution, and you get much better solution.
You designed a distribution system for this water utility that saved them 50 million off that first 150 million by finding options that simply hadn't occurred to their own staff and that would have taken them an impossibly long time to figure out on their own. What was the reaction in that era of that water utility? They were sort of taking a chance on technology that then really was quite new. What did they say to you?
We came with first solutions, and those solutions were pretty good technically, so they satisfy their requirements. But then they started questioning the details. For example, we were given the cost for a particular pipe diameter per length of a pipe. So you said it's a 300 millimeter pipe. This is the cost per length. But then they said, oh, this particular pipe cannot be the same as another pipe with the same diameter, because one is in the verge and one is in the center of the street, very busy street. So we realized that over time, there was a learning curve for both of us. We came from this computational side of things, and they came from the practical side of things. And that process was very important because we then learned what the true objectives were and what the true constraints are that we only imagined at the very beginning.
Were they happy in the end with this design? Did they use it?
Yes. As far as I know, the design was accepted and then taken to be detailed for implementation.
Take us back a step. You said, and I love this, you said, I was a water engineer first and came to the computer science as a way of helping my water engineering. Tell us how you discovered the applicability of this kind of advanced computer science to water problems.
Yeah, I was a water engineer. That's how I graduated from civil engineering at University of Belgrade in Yugoslavia. And then I started working for a consultancy company. I was interested in what we call systems analysis, in water systems analysis. And that meant also dabbling into computing. So initially it was on Hewlett-Packard 41C. And then when the personal computers came in the early 80s, that's when I graduated with my undergraduate degree. Personal computers, first IBM PCs, and that was a great thing for us. So I got into it and then decided I'll do my master's and I want to do a PhD. But only a small number of universities in the world, let alone in my home country, that have PhD programs in that field. So I was looking to do it abroad. So I went to Canada. And that's how I ended up in the PhD program there, doing water again. But as the part of the PhD program, I had to take a few courses from ancillary departments, and I chose computer science. And one of the courses that I took was in artificial intelligence. So that's how kind of I moved from purely systems analysis computing to artificial intelligence and computing in the water sector.
What was that first class about artificial intelligence in the late 80s like? Do you remember anything about it?
Yeah, it was quite theoretic. We didn't do much computing. I remember my exam was that I had to write few prologue rules for the tic-tac-toe game. That stuck to my mind very clearly. But it was something that gave me the grounding in the area, and very, very grateful for being able to do that at that time.
People in the world of water are very accustomed to thinking in the water framework, and thinking about water is in fact a way of thinking. If you're in stormwater, if you're in precipitation and floodwater management, coastal management, water supply, there's actually a way of thinking about the world, a framework that helps you every day. And I think what people don't appreciate about computer programming, software programming, and then artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is a version of that, is that that too is a way of thinking. It's a whole new language and a problem-solving system. And once you learn it, then the world looks like a series of problems that you can solve. Do us a favor. Most of the people listening, we all use computers every single day, many of us every hour of every day in our work. That's as true in water as it is in academia, in engineering, in all kinds of other arenas, journalism. And we rely on AI in ways we may not even notice. When Netflix recommends movies or TV shows you might like, it has paid attention to what you've watched, paid attention to what everybody else on Netflix has watched, and connected the dots. Tell us what is a good basic definition in computer science of artificial intelligence and of machine learning, and what the difference between them is.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we all use Siris and Alexas and Google Assistants. And, when we apply for loans, the decisions are not being made by people anymore. The decision in the end is by a person, but the recommendation comes from the AI system, or smart heating in our house that learns how we use heating in the house. So all of it comes from that AI. But in order to kind of define AI, we need to go back and think about human intelligence. And for me, that's the mental quality that consists of that ability to learn from experience, adapt to a new situation, or understand and handle abstract concepts, and basically involve some intelligent thinking. And that's where we want computers to show a little bit of that. By creating these algorithms, like the smart heating algorithm, like algorithm to recognize who is a good risk for loan and who is not, we create these models based on data with the single goal of making predictions to help us in the water sector make a prediction what the demand is going to be, what the pressure is going to be, how do we deliver water, and to optimize those water systems.
I might expand your definition in the following way. Artificial intelligence is a very sophisticated version of pattern recognition. You brought up the example of loans, which I think people can really relate to. You walk in, you fill out a mortgage loan application or a car loan application. There's 26 pages of questions, plus they have access to, at least in the United States, they have access to all your previous credit performance. Do you pay the water bill on time? Do you pay your Visa bill on time? How big is your Visa bill? And then they compare all of your information to everybody who's ever gotten a mortgage loan or everybody who's ever gotten a car loan. Not really, but all that data is loaded in. And then they can say, people who look like you do this. And they say, well, if we're going to loan Charles money for a house, we better charge him a little more because his credit looks like people who default on their loan a little higher. You talked about the heating system in a home with a smart thermostat. It's just paying attention to where you spend time and what parts of the house need to be heated and what parts don't. Probably the living room at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's okay to let that cool off. Probably the kitchen at 7:30 in the morning needs to be warmed up. It notices a year's worth of patterns or a month's worth of patterns. And that kind of pattern recognition, you use that to say, well, if the water demand has been this in these circumstances on August 4th, going back 5 years, we can take a run at what the water demand or the water flow is going to be like. You've spent 25 years trying to help water systems behave more smartly. And just as people use pipes and pumps, and now they use computers, computer controls, SCADA and all that, you have tried to get people to use AI to help their water systems. I gather that you've encountered a kind of interesting problem, which is that at most water utilities, even the most basic things aren't shared. Even without AI, people are not using their data smartly. Talk a little bit about your experience plunging in and trying to see how water utilities get their work done and where the impediments to using AI start.
Water utilities are very traditional organizations because they provide something that sustains life. In a sense, they have to be conservative, but also they're conservative in a sense that we have siloed behavior. They're structurally organized, or at least in the past, I can see the change now in the organizations, but in the past you had various departments. You had a department that was in charge of looking into pipe replacement, so asset management. You had a department that was looking at water quality, testing, making sure that we receive good quality water. Another department was looking into leakage, water losses from the system. And there wasn't much of open data that everybody could use because the people who were doing the assets, they had their own data. Who were doing water quality, they had their own data. So that idea of creating open data within an organization hasn't been around for long in water utilities. And that's where the strength of AI comes in. If the AI tools will have access to all of that data within. The next step of water utilities is to look beyond what they collect, what their sensors provide, but also to look into publicly available information, weather data, where their customers are during the day, looking into cellular phone data. So to see what in real time is happening. Smart meters, quite a lot of countries have customer meters, but they're read at best once a month and sometimes every 6 months or a year. But some organizations, water utilities, are now moving to smart meters in the customer's house so that they can assess that demand every 5 minutes, 15 minutes. So can you imagine the amount of data that is being collected, and can it be analyzed by a person or a department? No, it will have to be helped by the AI tools, by computational tools that are now at disposal of water utilities.
Let's unpack that very briefly, because you said something really important. A smart water meter is something that everyone in the world of water can understand. A water meter attached to a home or attached to a business, it's measuring water flow like a traditional water meter, but it's got a little bit of cellular data technology built in, and it can transmit the water use back to the water utility, just the way your cell phone knows what the traffic is on the streets leading to the highway and on the highway. And so instead of somebody coming and lifting the lid on the 23rd day of each month and wiping the glass dial off and writing down or even recording in an iPad what that meter was reading that day, you're actually learning how people are using the water. You could read it every day at 4:00 in the afternoon from the previous day, or what you're saying is you could read it once an hour or once every 10 minutes. Then you can look at a whole community's water use. You can look at when businesses cycle up and cycle down. You don't have to guess, people do take showers. How did water use change in the pandemic? Maybe the amount of showering changed, maybe the time in the day changed. Why does knowing that help you manage a water utility?
The holy grail for every utility is the demand, knowing what the demand for their service is. And if you can imagine countries like the UK, where most people are not even metered, can you imagine how can you manage the system? And also, if you can measure it every once a year and say this is the total demand, you don't know because it changes daily. It changes every moment of the day. So to have a handle on the demand, more data you have about that demand, the better it is. So now imagine that most of us had a smart meter. The water utility will know exactly spatially across the city in which part of the city there is more demand. And also over time, they will know how this demand changes so that they can adjust their system, their pumps, their valves, anything that they need to do in order to deliver that demand to the customer. And also the other thing is they can help customers in many ways. If, for example, they realize that the water is being used continuously in the early hours of the morning, say 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, that's an indication that maybe a leak in that particular house. They can alert the customer. Or we've come across very innovative ways of using the data, analyzing data. For example, if you had a customer that is vulnerable, elderly or ill, and if there is no consumption of the water in the house, somebody could be alerted that person may be in danger. Maybe they've fallen and couldn't get up or use water. Obviously, privacy is something very important there, and water utilities are well aware of it. But there is well of opportunities there to analyze, to see who are the big users, who are the small users, to segment the customers like any other service, to know what different segments of customers expect from the service.
Installing smart meters is not itself artificial intelligence. It generates a cascade, literally a tidal wave of data that artificial intelligence tools and machine learning tools can analyze. And then just what you said, why do water utilities want to know what the demand is going to be? Well, most important, they want to be able to meet it, right? You don't ever want somebody to turn on the faucet and not have water. But the problem is that water utilities build in a huge cushion. And the cushion costs money for storage, for energy, for the size of pipes. You want to know not just what the demand is, but how the demand is changing in various sectors, in various arenas, that you can save 10 or 15 or 20% of your operational costs if you can actually understand what people are doing with the water in real time. And that's exactly the kind of thing that machine learning is great at, artificial intelligence is great at. And one of the things that's great about bringing AI and machine learning to bear on water is something you alluded to. There's lots of historical data. In fact, what you do is you say, hey, water utility, hey, company, hey, city, here's what we think is going on. Now, we're going to take all your data from 2001 to 2011. We're going to apply the formulas and predictions we've written, and let's see if it can predict what's going to happen in 2004, 2007, and 2011, because we know what happened already. You can actually test this kind of computer programming using the historical data and see if it gets it right.
That's absolutely right. That's what we call validation of these models. So you build a model based on the training data. That's this historical data that you were talking about. But we save some of that historical data that we know what really happened. And then once we develop a model, we validate it on that so that it works, even for those data that it hasn't seen in the training, in the calibration.
You use the word model. These are mathematical models. These are models of behavior or what's going to happen, literally made out of math equations, right? There's not a model that sits on your desk.
Yes, you're absolutely right. There is quite a lot of maths behind this AI, which we are trying to kind of explain in very simple terms today.
Relatively recently, you guys were hired by a Dutch utility that wanted to use AI to help it place sensors better in its network. Tell us that story, both as an illustration of how far we have to go and also the value of AI in day-to-day operations.
As we already said, there is more and more of these sensors out there, and the utilities are part of the entire world that is moving in that digitalization kind of direction. So they're looking into placing those sensors. And if I can explain it the best way, you have a network of pipes, And then you have to put these sensors cleverly so that your coverage of that network is the best. So we were approached by one of our companies, and they said, we already have a number of sensors. I think they had 8 of them in the network, that they wanted us to use AI tools to find the best locations for up to 20 additional sensors. These pipes are below ground. They're difficult to access. So putting sensors in the pipes after you bury the pipes is not that easy. And also the locations, you cannot put it everywhere in the system. There are locations that are appropriate for it. So the space for solutions are a bit reduced, but still with 100,000 or 50,000 or 250,000 of pipes, there are lots of locations that you can put them there. So with those 8, the first step that we looked into was to see what is the percentage of their network that they cover. And it was very, very low. We're talking very small percentages. So that was the first step. Then we looked into how about if we add up to 20 of those. And we did the first run of our model to demonstrate to our client where those locations could be. We used the AI tools to do that, produced the results and went to them. And as I said, there are locations that you can and you cannot put those. And they said, oh, but that one that you put there or that your algorithm put there, we cannot do it in the street. Physically, there is no access to it. So then we had to go back again to rethink, to change the algorithm so that it ignores those places that they indicated and went to the next step. So it was a whole process, and it was training for both the researchers, our organization, and also for the client, because then they realized what we were looking, how those equations that are objectives, maximize the coverage, minimize the number of these devices, how those objectives have to be formulated in order for algorithm to be helpful. So for us, it was a very interesting project, and we were commended by the client in the end because they learned a lot throughout the process. I wish I'd known that 20 years ago because it would have saved me quite a lot of headache at the time.
You're tapping a really important point, which is that the culture of computer science and artificial intelligence and machine learning and the culture of water systems are very, very different. And to work effectively together, they have to actually get to know each other. The world of computer science, you're describing what I would call an iterative process, a series of steps. The first version wasn't perfect. You don't throw up your hands, say that this technique is stupid, and fire Dragan Savic. You say, okay, you took a run at it, but we didn't actually tell you that there's actually some more rules. No sensors in the middle of a street, no sensors on pipes deeper than 10 meters. Here's some fresh rules, try again. That's, of course, standard procedure in computer science. They believe in getting it first rather than getting it right, and then they fix it on the fly. By the same token, the computer science people may not appreciate that the level of conservatism in the world of water, which is water's not an app on your phone that plays solitaire. The water has to be both perfect and safe and available when people need it. And you can't say to people, oops, software glitch, we'll get back to you at 10:30 tomorrow morning. And so that conservatism is why water systems, especially in the developed world, around the world, are so reliable. And so bridging that cultural gap, first of all, you have to be able to do it to be effective, but you kind of have to know that computer people and water people literally see the world differently before you step into it, or both sides are going to end up really frustrated.
You're absolutely right. I can see that computer scientists or artificial intelligence professionals have to learn a little bit about the water business in order to be able to help water utilities in achieving their goals. And the same thing on the other side, that water professionals have to learn a little bit more about computing and about artificial intelligence in order to be able to take advantage of what computer scientists are offering. And there are movements in the educational world that universities are realizing that, and they're trying to educate new generation of the water leaders that are kind of educated in this hydroinformatics, so that they understand what AI can do for you, but also understand the basic principles of water management and planning.
Hydroinformatics being the use of information to help do the hydroengineering more effectively. That's where that term comes from. It does require a certain amount of both humility and curiosity on both sides. The computer people can't think, water, it's just like everything else, because of course it's not. It's not like making a surgical robot or helping a bank analyze loan risk. It's its own world. And the water people need a little patience with a technique they're not familiar with. Just a year ago, not quite a year ago, you published a paper in the white paper series from IHAR, and the title of the paper, kind of remarkable given that we're 30 years into this, the title of the paper was, "What is Artificial Intelligence and How Can Water Planning and Management Benefit from It?" I assume the goal was a little bit like what we're doing today, to kind of open this world to water people who might not be thinking about it. We've been a little narrow in our focus in our conversation, but tell us, what can AI help you do in the world of water? What are the kinds of problems AI can help tackle?
Various applications are already available in the field. Apart from this design that you're dealing with gazillions of potential solutions and then you zero onto a good one, there are various applications where people are using AI to predict the demand. And if the signal from these sensors is deviating significantly for the demand, which it should have been, then you have an anomaly in the system. That could be a leak, that could be a pipe break, that could be a change in water quality that you didn't want. Also, there is quite a lot of new developments in using CCTV, closed circuit TV, within the pipes. But then the analysis, video analysis, is given to artificial intelligence to detect any broken pipes, any other defects in the pipes, so that interventions can be made. There are also applications in agriculture. So with simple sensors to realize how much there is wetness in the ground and what is the optimal level of irrigation for a particular plant, so that you do not over-irrigate or under-irrigate and reduce delivery of whatever you're growing. So various opportunities for using AI in the water sector. The last one, if I may, it's on the sewer side, because I was focusing mostly on the water supply, but we have a problem that in quite a few countries we have both sewer water, domestic sewer water, and rainwater in the same pipe. And when we have big rains, what happens is the wastewater treatment plants cannot take, the capacity is not big enough. So you get that dirty water diverted into water bodies. So again, prediction, when that is happening, by combining the rainfall input and by combining the capacity of the network, we can predict when this happens so that water utility can intervene beforehand.
Right. You're making this incredible point. If you manage a farm, it's only within the last 10 years that you actually have the ability to know what the state of your field is in water terms beyond an estimate. Now you can use sensors, and you can then use AI to help you manage what water goes on that field, so you not just don't overwater or underwater, so you don't waste the water that would otherwise be necessary to irrigate somewhere else. And all the way at the other end of the system, we can use AI to prevent these, what we call combined sewer and stormwater overflows that are such a plague in a lot of places. In fact, AI is just a tool. If you've got a water problem at this point, 30 years into the development of these digital tools, there is probably an AI solution. I love the example you started with. You can go video your entire water supply and wastewater piping system, but then someone has to sit and look at every second, every minute of video, looking for the problem areas. And to be honest, a person can do that, but there's nothing more tedious. You do it for 10 minutes, then you need to go do something else just to keep your attention focused, because it is so boring and the actual problem areas are so rare. But you can teach a computer program to look at those video pictures and flag the 20 places that might be a problem. The computer's never going to lose attention. And so that's a perfect example of, we've got this whole new technology. We can video the whole inside of our systems. Who's going to look at it?
Another important thing about that example that you were using is consistency as well. If you use AI, it will always come up with the same conclusion. And it will be, in many cases, much more consistent in accuracy than individuals. So that's an additional kind of benefit of using AI in that case.
Right. You don't want 3 different people giving 3 different opinions about what needs to be repaired or looked at and what doesn't. Where are we going? You've been working on this for 30 years, and I think you at one point said to me that AI was only being used in the world of water at a rate of 5 to 10% of the places it could be helpful. Is there going to be a blossoming? What needs to happen next, and what do you think will happen in the next 5 years? What's going to change the game?
Well, the game has already been changing due to people realizing that there isn't enough funding. If you look into what the American Society of Civil Engineers is saying about the trillions of dollars needed for just American infrastructure, you can see that we need to focus the investment in particular parts that are at risk, and also that we are going to get, as you again would say, most bang for your buck. All of this AI is going to help us humans make better decisions. So I normally call this actually augmented intelligence, because we are working together with these machines to give us better ideas. As the number of sensors in the world is increasing, just think about mobile phones 20 years ago and now. The same is happening at a slower pace with water utilities. But we are realizing more and more that water is becoming much more important due to the changes in climate. We are getting more and more droughts, and more intense droughts, and more flooding on the other hand. So these tools are becoming more and more invaluable. And also with the amount of data and sensing we are doing from satellites, from drones, and from CCTV cameras as well, we have to use these tools, because individuals, humans without AI tools won't be able to process that amount of data. I see a very bright future for AI in the water sector. And also that water sector will change with the rest of the world with this digital transformation.
That's a great place to put a stop on it. It sounds to me like what you're saying is the problems in the water world are growing, especially driven by climate change, but also the resources to tackle those problems are not only not growing, in some places they're doing the opposite. They're either limited or shrinking. And one answer to that tension is artificial intelligence tools to help you make better and more efficient decisions. It's a path through that really tough period.
Yeah, that's a good summary of it, because as you just said, limited resources, much more complex decisions in the future. Water is a part of the entire system, human, physical, engineered infrastructure that we need to manage better in the future. And AI should be part of that future management planning and options.
So if you're in the world of computer science, don't hesitate to go take a few courses in the water engineering or environmental science department, or do just what Dragan Savic did. If you're in the world of water, absolutely go take some computer science courses.
Well, that reminds me of that great American war poster that says, "We need you," and absolutely right. both sides. We need both AI people, computer scientists, and water engineers to work together so that we can learn from each other and create a better water world.
Dragan, thanks for taking us into this section of the water world that you know so well and have worked on so hard. And we really, in particular, appreciate your sense of optimism about where we're headed.
Thank you, Charles. I enjoyed this very much.
Thanks for joining us today. Special thanks to our series sponsor, Rexnord. Additional support is provided by the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, along with the Fund for Lake Michigan and R.W. Baird & Company. Don't miss a beat. Subscribe to Water Sessions today.